It was a quiet Monday morning when Laura entered the office, holding her usual cup of coffee and a small smile on her face. She had worked at the company for almost 7 years. The place felt like a second home to her. She knew every corner, every sound, and even the smell of fresh coffee from the machine near the break room. But that morning, something felt different. People were whispering. Some looked at her and quickly turned away. She tried to ignore it, thinking maybe she was just imagining things. Laura sat at her desk and opened her computer. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed in her password. She had been feeling pressure lately. The new manager, Mr. Collins, had been acting distant. He had started calling more meetings, giving her extra work, and asking questions about her performance. Laura was not used to being treated that way. She had always been one of the most trusted employees. Around mid-morning, Mr. Collins asked her to come to his office. She walked in with a polite smile, trying to stay calm. He looked serious, his tie slightly loose, a file open on his desk. He did not offer her a seat right away. That made her heart beat faster. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and rehearsed. He told her the company was moving in a new direction, and her position was no longer needed. Laura sat still, unable to speak. It felt like the words had punched the air out of her chest. She asked if she had done something wrong, but he just said it was a strategic decision. There was no emotion in his face. She looked around his office, the same one she had helped decorate last Christmas. Everything felt strange now. He told her she had an hour to pack her things. Security would escort her out. Her throat tightened, and tears filled her eyes, but she didn't want to cry in front of him. She stood up quietly, nodded, and left his office without saying another word. When Laura returned to her desk, her coworkers avoided her eyes. Only one, a young man named Ethan, whispered a soft "I'm sorry." That almost made her break down. She began putting her things into a box, her photo frame, a plant she had cared for, and a few notebooks filled with her handwritten notes. She had poured her soul into her work, and now she was being removed like she had never mattered. As she was packing, she noticed something odd. A group of people were decorating the meeting room. Balloons, a banner, and laughter filled the air. She could not believe it. They were setting up for someone, and then she saw the name on the banner. It was for her replacement. They were throwing a welcome party for her. While she was still there, packing her things, her hands started shaking, and she had to sit down. She couldn't understand how people could be so cruel. A woman from HR came to her desk and told her it was time to go. Laura took one last look at her workspace. She had always believed in doing the right thing, always helping others, always working late when someone needed her. But now, none of it mattered. She felt invisible. She left the building with heavy steps, holding her box like it was the only thing left of her old life. Outside, she stood by the sidewalk, trying to catch her breath. The air was cold, and the sky was gray. It almost matched how she felt inside. She didn't know where to go or what to do next. She had given everything to that job, and now it was gone. She sat on a bench nearby and closed her eyes. She thought about all the files she had worked on, the ones with important information, the ones that only she knew how to manage. She had always kept her notes organized and detailed, locked in a digital folder only she could access. Laura remembered the last email she had sent before being called to the manager's office. It was unfinished, something she had meant to send later that day. A small thought crossed her mind, maybe she had left something behind. Something that would make them remember her. She didn't plan it, but she didn't regret it either. As she sat there, she watched the office windows from afar. She could see shadows moving, laughter echoing faintly through the glass. They were celebrating someone new, someone who would take her chair. But deep inside, she knew that not everything she had built could be easily replaced. Laura woke up the next morning feeling lost. The house was too quiet. For years, she had followed the same routine, waking up early, rushing to the office, checking emails, and drinking her coffee while reading reports. Now there was nothing to do. The silence made her feel smaller, like the world had suddenly moved on without her. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. There were no messages from anyone at work. Not even a goodbye. She opened her laptop out of habit, but she didn't know what to look at. Her eyes wandered to an old folder on her desktop labeled Projects. Inside it were files she had created, organized, and protected. Some of them were personal notes, others were detailed summaries of company work, things she had never shared because she wanted to make them perfect first. Laura sighed. She thought about deleting them but stopped herself. Something inside her whispered, "Leave it." Maybe one day, someone would open them and understand the truth, that she wasn't lazy or unimportant, that she had cared deeply about the work. Meanwhile, back at the office, everyone was pretending nothing had happened. The party for the new employee had gone well. People laughed, music played softly, and the banner with "Welcome, Megan" hung across the wall. Megan was young and eager to impress. She had heard about Laura, the woman she replaced, but she didn't know the full story. Mr. Collins had told her that Laura had decided to move on. He made it sound simple. Megan smiled politely and thanked him for the opportunity. She was excited, it was her first big job. But as she sat at her new desk, she felt an odd tension in the air. Some of her coworkers avoided eye contact, others spoke quietly when she walked by. She couldn't tell if they liked her or not. Later that afternoon, Megan decided to explore the computer she had been assigned. It was Laura's old system, freshly formatted by IT. But as she started setting up her files, she noticed something strange, a hidden folder deep in one of the drives. It was small and didn't have a clear name, just a few letters that didn't make much sense. Out of curiosity, she opened it. Inside were documents, notes, and screenshots. Most looked like work materials, project outlines, meeting summaries, and email drafts. But the more she scrolled, the more she realized there was something else. There were files labeled Client Concerns, Internal Notes, and Collins Report. Megan frowned. She opened one, and her eyes widened. It contained messages between Mr. Collins and another manager, discussing things they shouldn't have been doing, reassigning budgets, taking credit for Laura's work, and pushing her out slowly to make room for a fresh face. Megan's hands froze on the keyboard. She couldn't believe what she was reading. It was all there, the reason Laura had been treated unfairly. Laura had known something was happening, and she had saved the proof. Megan leaned back in her chair, trying to calm her heart. She didn't know what to do. Should she tell someone? Should she pretend she hadn't seen it? That night, Megan couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those files. Laura must have worked hard to collect them. It wasn't revenge, it felt more like a cry for fairness. Megan felt guilty. She had taken the job happily, not realizing what had really happened. The next morning, Megan arrived early, before anyone else. She sat at her desk and stared at the computer screen. Her conscience told her she had to do something. But she was new. If she spoke up, they might fire her too. Still, something in her heart didn't let her stay quiet. She opened the folder again and copied a few documents to her flash drive. She thought about reaching out to Laura, but she didn't have her number. She decided to send her an email instead. It was short and careful, just a message saying she had found something that belonged to her and asking if they could talk. At home, Laura was surprised to see an email from her old company address. Her heart raced as she read it. She didn't know who Megan was, but she could sense honesty in her words. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. Someone inside cared enough to reach out. She wrote back a short message, thanking her and asking to meet somewhere quiet. It was a simple reply, but her hands trembled as she sent it. Something inside her told her that her story with that company wasn't finished yet. That evening, as the sun began to set, Megan sat in her car outside a small cafe, waiting nervously. She didn't know what to expect. But she knew one thing, Laura didn't deserve what had happened to her. And maybe, just maybe, she could help make it right. Laura arrived early at the cafe. It was a small place she often visited after work when she still had her job. The smell of coffee and baked bread made her feel calm, even though her heart was beating fast. She sat at a corner table near the window, clutching her bag tightly. She didn't know what to expect from this meeting. She didn't even know what Megan looked like. After a few minutes, a young woman walked in. She looked nervous, holding her phone and glancing around until she spotted Laura. She smiled softly and walked over. "Hi, you must be Laura," she said, her voice gentle. Laura nodded and invited her to sit down. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Laura studied Megan. She looked kind, not arrogant like she had imagined her replacement might be. Megan finally took a deep breath and said, "I found something on your old computer." Laura's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She stayed quiet, waiting. Megan continued, "There were files, about the company, about Mr. Collins. I think you saved them before you left." Laura lowered her eyes and nodded slowly. "I didn't mean for anyone to see them," she said softly. "But I knew something wasn't right. I just wanted to keep proof in case I ever needed it." Megan nodded. "You were right. I read some of them. They were using your work, and they planned to get rid of you months ago." Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. "It's not fair. You didn't deserve that." Laura smiled sadly. "Life isn't always fair," she said. "But thank you for telling me." Megan leaned forward. "I think you can use this information to defend yourself. You can show people what really happened." Laura looked out the window for a moment, thinking. "Even if I tried," she said, "they would deny it. They have power. I'm just one person." "But you're not alone anymore," Megan said. "I can help. I still work there. I can get more information if you need it." Laura was surprised by her courage. Megan barely knew her, yet she was ready to take a risk. Laura felt a wave of gratitude. "That's very brave of you," she said softly. "But be careful. They won't like it if they find out." They talked for nearly an hour. Laura told Megan what the company used to be like, how people cared for each other before Mr. Collins became manager. She explained how things started to change, how the pressure grew, and how small mistakes were used as excuses to humiliate her. Megan listened carefully, her eyes full of sympathy. Before they left, Megan handed Laura a small flash drive. "I copied some of the files," she said quietly. "Just in case." Laura hesitated but took it. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I'll do yet, but this means a lot to me." They said goodbye, and Laura watched Megan walk away through the cafe window. Something inside her began to stir, a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't anger. It was determination. That night, Laura sat at her desk at home and plugged in the flash drive. She opened the files and read everything again, the emails, the reports, the plans. Each word reminded her of how hard she had worked and how easily they had erased her. She realized she couldn't just let them get away with it. Meanwhile, at the office, Megan tried to act normal. She worked quietly, smiled at people, and avoided Mr. Collins as much as she could. But she felt the tension growing. Every time she opened her computer, she worried that someone might find out what she had done. One afternoon, Mr. Collins called her into his office. Her stomach dropped. She tried to keep her face calm as she walked in. He smiled politely. "How are you settling in, Megan?" he asked. "Pretty well," she said carefully. He leaned back in his chair. "Good. I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable. You have big shoes to fill." Laura was efficient, but she didn't adapt to change. "I hope you'll do better." Megan nodded, pretending to agree, though her heart was pounding. She knew exactly what kind of a change he meant. When she left his office, she took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't stay quiet forever. Laura deserved justice. Maybe she did too, for all the lies they told. That night, Megan sent Laura another email. "I think there's more you should know," she wrote. They're planning something new with your old projects. Maybe we can stop them before it's too late. Laura read the message and felt a rush of emotion. For the first time since losing her job, she didn't feel powerless. She replied right away, telling Megan to meet her again. This time, they would make a plan. As the night grew darker, Laura closed her laptop and looked out the window. The city lights flickered like small stars in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were still working late in that same office, laughing and pretending everything was fine. But soon, she thought, the truth would come out. A few days later, Laura and Megan met again. This time, they chose a quiet park away from the office. It was early evening, and the air was cool. The sound of children playing and birds chirping made it feel peaceful, but both women were tense. Laura brought her small notebook filled with notes and dates. Megan carried her laptop in a simple brown bag. They sat on a bench under a large tree. Laura opened her notebook. "I think I can show you where it started," she said softly. "These are the days they began moving my projects to other departments." Megan turned on her laptop and opened a few folders. "I checked the company records," she said. "Some of your files were renamed, and your name was removed from the reports. It looks like Mr. Collins and another manager, Susan, took the credit." Laura's heart sank. "I knew it," she whispered. "They didn't even try to hide it." Megan nodded. "There's more. They've been using your data to build a new client system, and they're saying it's their original idea." Laura looked out at the lake nearby. The water was calm, but her mind was racing. "That project was my idea," she said. "I spent months working on it. They promised me a promotion if it worked." Megan looked at her. "We can prove it's yours. The files have timestamps and your initials. You wrote those notes." Laura smiled faintly, though her eyes were tired. "You're very brave, Megan. I don't want you to get in trouble." "I'm already in it," Megan said. "If they find out I met you, I could lose my job. But I can't just stay quiet and pretend it's fine." They spent 2 hours comparing files, screenshots, and emails. Laura explained everything she remembered, and Megan showed her what had changed since she left. Slowly, they began building a clear picture of how the company had planned to remove Laura and take over her work. When they finished, Megan said, "We should send this to someone outside the company, maybe a reporter or a lawyer." Laura hesitated. "That would make it public," she said. "It could hurt your career." Megan shook her head. "I'd rather tell the truth than live with guilt." Laura didn't reply right away. She looked at the papers on her lap. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of strength returning. "All right," she said finally. "Let's do it. But carefully." They agreed to meet again in a few days to gather more proof. As Megan walked away from the park, she felt nervous but also proud. She knew she was doing the right thing. The next morning at the office, Megan noticed small changes. People seemed quieter when she walked by. Mr. Collins gave her a long look during the team meeting. She tried to act normal, taking notes and smiling when spoken to. But she could feel the tension growing. Later that day, she received a message from Susan asking her to come to a private meeting. Megan's stomach turned. When she entered the small meeting room, Susan was already there, arms crossed. "Megan," she said sharply, "we've been hearing strange things. You've been accessing old project files. Is there a reason for that?" Megan froze for a second but quickly answered, "I was just reviewing them to understand the ongoing work. I didn't mean anything by it." Susan stared at her for a moment before nodding slowly. "Be careful," she said. "Some of those files are confidential. You wouldn't want to make a mistake so early in your career." Megan nodded politely and left the room, her hands shaking. She knew now that someone had noticed. That night, she called Laura. "They're suspicious," she said quietly. "I think they're watching what I do." Laura's voice was calm but firm. "Don't open anything else from your office computer," she said. "I'll handle the next part." What will you do? Megan asked. I still know a few people in the company, Laura said. Not everyone agreed with what happened. I'll see if anyone is willing to talk. For the next few days, Laura reached out to a few old coworkers, people she trusted. Most were scared to get involved, but one man, Ethan, agreed to meet her. He was the only one who had whispered, "I'm sorry," to her on her last day. When they met at a coffee shop, Ethan looked nervous. You didn't hear this from me, he said quietly, but they planned everything. They made up reasons to fire you. Mr. Collins wanted to show the board he could refresh the team. Laura listened carefully. Do you have anything written? She asked. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll try to get something. But if they find out, I'm done. Laura thanked him and left, feeling both hopeful and anxious. She now had Megan's files and Ethan's words. The puzzle was coming together. That night, she sat at her desk again, surrounded by papers and her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she began writing an email, not to Mr. Collins, but to a journalist who specialized in workplace stories. She wasn't sure if she would send it yet, but for the first time, she felt like she had control over her story. The next few days were long and tense for both Laura and Megan. Every morning, Megan woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. She didn't know if someone was checking her computer or watching her messages. At work, Mr. Collins had become unusually friendly, which made her even more nervous. He smiled too much and asked too many questions about how she was adjusting. She answered politely but kept her guard up. Laura, on the other hand, spent her days gathering every piece of evidence she had. She stayed in her small apartment, surrounded by printed documents, old emails, and notes. She had not sent the email to the journalist yet. She kept reading and rewriting it, afraid of what might happen once the truth came out. That evening, Laura received a call from Ethan. He spoke quietly, his voice trembling. I got something, he said. It's not much, but it's proof that Collins used your reports for the new project. Laura's heart skipped a beat. Can you send it to me? She asked. I can't use my work email, Ethan replied. Meet me tomorrow near the old bookstore on Maple Street. I'll give you a copy. The next day, Laura met Ethan as planned. He looked around nervously before handing her a small envelope. Inside was a printed report with her original notes still visible in the margins. Be careful, he said. If they find out I helped you, I'll lose my job. Laura thanked him sincerely. You did the right thing, she said. I won't let your name be mentioned anywhere. When she returned home, she added the new document to her growing folder of evidence. She stared at it for a long time. It felt strange, to finally have proof of what she had always known but could never prove. That night, she decided it was time. She opened her laptop and read her email draft to the journalist one more time. Her fingers hesitated over the send button. She whispered to herself, they thought they could erase me. Let's see if they still can. Then she pressed send. At the same time, Megan's situation at the office was getting worse. Rumors had started to spread. She noticed a few coworkers whispering whenever she passed by. One afternoon, she returned from lunch to find that her computer was being checked by IT. When she asked why, one of the technicians simply said, routine security check. But she could tell from his tone that it wasn't normal. Later that day, Mr. Collins called her into his office again. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. Megan, he said slowly, you've been doing great work, but I've heard you've been spending time looking at old records. Is that true? Megan felt her throat tighten. Only to understand how the projects were structured, she replied carefully. He nodded, pretending to accept her answer. Good. I like curious employees, he said. But remember, curiosity can sometimes lead to trouble. I'd hate to see someone new make mistakes that could hurt their career. She smiled weakly and left the office, but her hands were shaking. She went straight to the restroom, locked the door, and took deep breaths. She knew now that he was on to her. That night, Laura received a message from the journalist. They wanted to talk. The reporter, a woman named Claire, said she was very interested in Laura's story and asked if she could verify the documents. Laura felt nervous but hopeful. She replied yes, and agreed to a call the next morning. When they spoke, Claire listened carefully as Laura explained everything, how she had been pushed out, how her work was stolen, how they celebrated her replacement, and how Megan had found the hidden files. Claire asked questions, taking notes. If everything checks out, she said, this could be a strong story. But we'll need someone from inside the company to confirm. Laura hesitated. Megan could help, she said quietly. But she's still working there. I don't want her to get hurt. Claire understood. We'll protect her identity if necessary, she said. After the call, Laura emailed Megan to explain what had happened. Megan replied quickly, saying she wanted to help but was scared. Laura understood her fear, but she also reminded her, you're the only one who can show what they're doing right now. The truth matters. The next morning, Megan woke up before dawn. She sat in her car outside the office, watching people arrive. Her heart raced as she thought about what she was about to do. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, it's time. Inside the building, she logged in quietly and began collecting screenshots of recent reports, emails, and documents that proved Collins was still using Laura's work. Her hands were trembling, but she kept going. Just as she finished copying the last file, her screen froze. A message appeared, access denied. System lockout. Her heart dropped. She tried to move the mouse, but nothing worked. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Megan, a voice said. It was Mr. Collins. He stood behind her, his face calm but his eyes sharp. Why don't you step into my office? Megan's stomach turned cold. She knew there was no way out now. Megan followed Mr. Collins to his office with her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. Her hands were cold, and her throat felt dry. She tried to stay calm, but she could feel the fear rising inside her. The office door closed behind them with a heavy click. Mr. Collins sat down in his chair and pointed for her to sit across from him. His voice was calm but full of control. You've been working very hard lately, he said. But I have some concerns about what you've been accessing on the company's system. Megan tried to speak, but her voice came out shaky. I was just reviewing old reports to understand how the previous projects worked. He nodded slowly, pretending to consider her words. That's what you said before, he replied. But this time, IT found that you tried to copy files that were not part of your department. Files that belonged to the previous employee, Laura. Megan's heart stopped for a moment. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Mr. Collins leaned forward, his tone changing. You see, Megan, we trusted you. You're new here, and we gave you a chance. I'd hate to think you've already broken that trust. She took a deep breath. I didn't do anything wrong, she said quietly. I just wanted to understand how she worked. I didn't copy anything. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't a kind smile. Then you won't mind if we check your personal devices, he said. Megan froze. She knew she had the flash drive in her bag, the one with all the copied files. If they found it, she would be finished. I don't have any company data on my personal devices, she said quickly, trying to sound calm. Mr. Collins studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll see. In the meantime, I think you should take the rest of the week off. We'll call you once this matter is settled. Megan stood up slowly. Am I being fired? She asked. He smiled again. Let's call it a temporary suspension. When she walked out of his office, her legs felt weak. She went straight to her desk, grabbed her bag, and left the building before anyone could see the tears welling up in her eyes. Once she was outside, she sat on a bench near the parking lot, shaking. She knew she couldn't go back now. That evening, she called Laura. Her voice was trembling. He knows, she said. They caught me. He said IT found the files. Laura's stomach dropped. Did they take anything from you? She asked. No, I got out before they could check my bag, Megan said. But they told me not to come back. Laura was silent for a moment, then said firmly, you did the right thing. They were going to find someone to blame anyway. Megan's voice cracked. What if they try to destroy the files now? What if they erase everything? Laura took a deep breath. We already have copies. And the journalist has the rest. They can't erase the truth. For the first time, Megan realized how much Laura had already done. You sent it, she asked. Yes, Laura said. The reporter called me again today. She said the story is moving forward. She just needs a few more confirmations before it's published. Megan felt a mix of fear and relief. Then it's really happening, she whispered. Laura's voice softened. It is. But we have to be careful. They'll fight back. The next morning, the company was buzzing with rumors. People whispered in corners, and emails went unanswered. Something had shifted. Megan's absence had been noticed, and Mr. Collins was acting more tense than usual. In his office, he sat with Susan, the other manager. Do you think she knows anything? Susan asked quietly. Collins rubbed his temples. I don't know, he said. But I'm not taking chances. We'll remove every trace of those old files. What about the reports? She asked. I already spoke to IT, he replied. They'll wipe everything by tomorrow morning. But what he didn't know was that one of the IT employees, a quiet man named Daniel, had overheard everything. Daniel had been at the company for years, and he had seen good people come and go unfairly. He didn't know Laura personally, but he remembered how upset she looked the day she was escorted out. Hearing Mr. Collins' plan to destroy evidence made his stomach turn. That night, Daniel secretly copied the remaining files before the deletion order went through. He didn't know what he would do with them yet, but he felt it was wrong to let the truth disappear. Meanwhile, Laura received another message from the journalist, Claire. The email said, we've confirmed internal changes and received new information from another source. The story is ready to go live tomorrow morning. Laura stared at the screen, unable to breathe for a moment. After weeks of fear and sadness, the truth was finally coming out. She looked around her small apartment, the empty coffee cups, the papers, the tired reflection in the window, and she whispered, it's time. Across town, Megan sat in her living room, still shaken by everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed. It was Laura's message, the story will be published tomorrow. Megan felt tears fill her eyes. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she had done something right. That night, both women lay awake in their separate homes, staring at the ceiling. The world outside was quiet, unaware that everything was about to change by morning. The next morning started like any other, but for Laura, everything felt different. She woke up early and sat at her kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee she could barely taste. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her laptop. Her heart was pounding in her chest. When the screen loaded, she saw it, her story was on the front page of the local news site. The headline read, former employee fired unfairly as company leaders take credit for her work. Her name was in the article, and so was Megan's, though only her first name was used. The story included screenshots, documents, and proof of what had been done. Laura read every word carefully. The article explained how Mr. Collins and another manager had stolen her project and fired her to hide it. It described how her replacement found the hidden files and helped bring the truth to light. There were quotes from anonymous sources confirming that the company had been covering up their actions. She felt tears welling up in her eyes. Not the same tears of pain she had cried before, these were tears of relief. For the first time since that awful day, she felt seen. The truth was out there. People would know she wasn't the failure they made her out to be. Her phone began to buzz. Messages poured in from old coworkers, friends, and even family members. Some said they had seen the article and couldn't believe it. Others apologized for not standing by her. One message, from Ethan, simply said, I knew you were right. I'm proud of you. Meanwhile, at the company, chaos had begun. The article spread fast. Employees whispered in hallways, shocked and angry. Mr. Collins stormed into the office, shouting for everyone to stay calm. He called an emergency meeting with upper management, but by then, the damage was done. An internal investigation was announced before noon. The company's reputation started to crumble online. Clients began asking questions. Comments on social media demanded justice for Laura and criticized the leadership. In her small apartment, Megan sat in front of her own laptop, reading the same article. Her name was everywhere. Her inbox was full of messages, some supportive, some not. A few coworkers thanked her quietly, saying they always suspected something was wrong. Others warned her to be careful. Her phone rang. It was Laura. "Are you okay?" Laura asked softly. Megan nodded even though her voice shook. "I think so. It's just, a lot." "You did something very brave," Laura said. "You told the truth when no one else would." Megan smiled weakly. "I couldn't have done it without you." That evening, Laura received another call, this time from Claire, the journalist. "The company just released a statement," Claire said. "They've suspended both managers while they investigate. You should expect more people to reach out soon." Laura thanked her. When she hung up, she sat in silence for a long moment. The sunset outside her window painted the sky in soft orange light. It felt like the end of something heavy, but also the start of something new. At the company, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Collins locked himself in his office, ignoring calls. Susan sat at her desk, pale and quiet. People avoided looking at them. Everyone knew what had happened now. Later that night, Laura got an unexpected message. It was from Daniel, the IT employee who had secretly saved the last set of files. He had used a private email address. "I just wanted to say thank you," he wrote. "What you did was right. I'm glad the truth came out." Laura smiled at the screen. She wrote back, "You helped too. You did the right thing." That night, she finally slept peacefully for the first time in months. The next morning, she woke to find another email, this one from a new company. They had read the story and wanted to meet her. They said they admired her courage and her honesty. Laura sat staring at the message for a long time. Slowly, she smiled. Maybe losing her old job wasn't the end of her life after all. Maybe it had been the start of something better. Megan also received a message that morning. It was from the HR department. They told her she could come in if she wanted to talk about her future at the company. She wasn't sure if they meant to fire her or to thank her, but she decided to go. She wanted to face whatever came next with her head held high. When she arrived, people looked at her differently, not with pity, but with respect. She was nervous, but she knew she had done something good. Laura and Megan texted that evening. Laura wrote, "No matter what happens next, I'm proud of us." Megan replied, "Me too. We did the right thing." Both women sat quietly in their separate homes, miles apart but connected by what they had shared. The world around them had changed, and so had they. They had stood up to something unfair, and won. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't completely over yet. There were still questions, still consequences. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But for now, they could finally breathe. A few weeks passed since the story broke, and life slowly began to change for both Laura and Megan. The noise of the news had quieted, but the effects were still strong. People were still talking, and the company's name was now tied to words like corruption and injustice. Mr. Collins resigned quietly. There was no big announcement, no farewell email, no party. He just disappeared one morning, his office empty, his nameplate gone. Susan was also removed from her position soon after. The company released another statement saying they were committed to fairness and transparency. But everyone knew it was only because they were trying to save what was left of their reputation. For Laura, things were starting to look brighter. She had accepted the new job offer from the company that reached out after reading her story. On her first day, she felt nervous but hopeful. Her new coworkers were kind, and her new manager treated her with respect. They had read about her courage and wanted her to bring that same honesty and strength to their team. She worked hard but with a lighter heart. She no longer felt like she had to prove herself to people who didn't value her. Sometimes, when she sat by the window during lunch, she thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the humiliation, the fear, it had all led her here. She had learned how strong she really was. Megan, on the other hand, took some time off before deciding what to do next. The company had offered to let her stay, saying she wasn't responsible for what happened, but she didn't want to go back. The place felt full of ghosts, memories of lies, betrayal, and guilt. She needed a fresh start. After a few weeks of thinking, she decided to move to another city and apply for a new job. She didn't have a clear plan yet, but she wanted to find work where she could feel proud again. She sold some of her old things, packed her bags, and said goodbye to the apartment that had seen so many sleepless nights. Before leaving, she met Laura one last time in a small cafe downtown. They hadn't seen each other in person since everything happened. When Laura walked in, Megan stood and hugged her tightly. "It's good to see you," Laura said softly. "You too," Megan smiled. "I can't believe how much has changed." They sat down with coffee and talked for hours. There was laughter and a few tears too. Laura thanked her again for helping her when she didn't have to. Megan shook her head. "You helped me too," she said. "You showed me what it means to stand up for something right." When it was time to say goodbye, Laura reached across the table and took Megan's hand. "You're going to do great things," she said. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again." Megan smiled. "Neither should you." They hugged again before parting ways. As Megan walked down the street, she felt lighter than she had in a long time. For the first time in months, she wasn't scared of what was next. She was free. Back in her new office, Laura sometimes thought about Megan. She hoped she was doing well. She even kept one of the printed newspaper articles folded in her desk drawer. It reminded her that truth could survive lies, that courage could outshine fear. One afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Megan. The message said, "I got the job. Starting next week. Thank you for everything." Laura smiled. She replied, "You earned it. Congratulations." She put her phone down and looked out the window. The sun was bright, and the world felt wide open. Months later, the company that had fired Laura continued to struggle. Their leadership had changed completely, and they were trying to rebuild trust. But for many people, the story of what happened never left their minds. It became a reminder of how easily good people could be mistreated, and how standing up for what's right could change everything. For Laura, life had moved on. She no longer carried the same sadness. She went to work every day with confidence, surrounded by people who respected her. Sometimes she still felt a twinge of fear when she remembered the past, but she had learned to let it go. One evening, as she walked home under a soft, orange sunset, she thought about the woman she used to be, the one who walked out of that office in tears, feeling broken and unwanted. She smiled to herself because she knew she wasn't that woman anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and free. Megan, too, found peace in her new life. She loved her new city, her new job, and the quiet sense of pride she felt when she looked back. She didn't regret what she had done. If anything, she was proud that she had chosen honesty over fear. In different places, both women lived on, their lives forever connected by a truth they had fought to bring to light. They didn't speak often, but they didn't need to. They both knew they had done something that mattered. And in the quiet moments of their separate lives, when they thought about how everything had once fallen apart, they could finally smile, because in the end, what they had left behind wasn't pain or regret. It was courage.